On day 22, she heard her husband file the paperwork to end her life. She heard him speak to his attorney on the phone outside her room. She heard the words withdrawal of life support and authorization, and she heard him say her name in the flat tone of a man completing an administrative task. She had been lying in that bed for 22 days. She could hear everything. She could feel everything. She could think everything. She could not move a single muscle. She could not open her eyes. She could not make a sound. The doctors had written vegetative state on her chart on day 3. She had heard them write it. She had known, with the particular precision of a woman who had spent 17 years as a neurosurgeon, exactly what they had gotten wrong and exactly what she needed and exactly how much time she had. She had been counting the days. Most people would have given up. Most people, lying in the dark for 22 days, hearing the person they loved make arrangements for their funeral, would have stopped fighting. Dr. Simone Carter counted to 22 and kept going. Because here is what Marcus Carter did not know about the woman he was filing paperwork to bury. She was the chief of neurosurgery at the hospital she was lying in. She knew every doctor in that building. She knew every protocol. She knew the exact assessment they had missed. And she knew that her best friend from medical school, the one person in the world who would look at that chart and immediately know something was wrong, had booked a flight home 4 days ago. She just had to survive until Amara got there. 22 days down, she could do more. This story will teach you something that Simone Carter understood somewhere around day 8 when she heard her husband use the word "we" in a phone call she was never supposed to hear. The most powerful thing a person can have is not money or status or strength. It is the decision, made in the dark, made alone, made when everything in you wants to stop, to keep going one more day. If you have ever had to fight for your life in silence, this story is for you. If you have ever been counted out by people who did not know who they were dealing with, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment and tell me, on day 22, would you have still been fighting? I read every single comment. Let us get into it. Dr. Simone Carter had been chief of neurosurgery at Meridian General for 14 months when she fell down the stairs. She had spent 17 years building toward that title, medical school at 22, a 6-year residency that had broken 3 of her contemporaries and sharpened her, a fellowship in neurovascular surgery that had taken her to Johns Hopkins and back. She had been an attending physician at 35 and department chief at 38. She was the youngest person to hold that position in the hospital's history and the first black woman, and she had celebrated neither of these facts publicly because she had always found that the people who led with their firsts were often the people who stopped at their firsts. She was not stopping. She knew the brain the way some people know their own house, every corridor, every room, every place where the structure was sound, and every place where it was vulnerable. She had operated on 347 patients in 17 years. She knew what a traumatic brain injury looked like from the inside. She knew the difference between a vegetative state and locked-in syndrome with the same certainty that she knew her children's voices. This knowledge would be the only weapon she had for 29 days. It was enough. She had met Marcus Carter at 31 at a fundraiser for a children's hospital she had spoken at. He had been building his real estate business then, not yet successful, ambitious in the specific way of a man who has decided where he is going and is working out the route. She had liked his directness and his laugh and the way he had listened when she talked about medicine without performing interest. They had been married for 12 years. James had been born in year 3, Lily in year 5. The children were, in Simone's assessment, the best thing either of them had contributed to the world, and she held this view with the particular conviction of a surgeon who had spent 17 years in proximity to what the human body could and could not survive.
The marriage had been good for a long time. Then it had been fine. Then, in the last 18 months, it had been something she had been meaning to address when she had time, which is the particular lie that busy people tell themselves about the things that matter most. She had not had the conversation yet. She had been going to have it in the spring, when her department was through the accreditation review. She never had it. The stairs had been wet. She had been carrying a stack of files. She had been thinking about a case. She had been halfway down when her foot went out from under her, and everything that came after was a different life from the one she had been living. The last ordinary thing she remembered was the third step from the bottom. She had been thinking about the Abernathy case, a 34-year-old with a basilar artery aneurysm she was scheduled to operate on Thursday. She had been running the approach in her mind, the way she always did with difficult cases, the particular mental rehearsal that looked from the outside like distraction. The stack of files went first. Then her hand found nothing where the banister should have been. Then the edge of the step caught the wrong part of her, and she hit the bottom landing at an angle that she would later understand with the clinical detachment of a woman who had read her own chart inside her head for 29 days, had compressed her brainstem at precisely the point that governed voluntary motor function. She was conscious when she hit the floor. She was conscious when Marcus came running from the kitchen. She was conscious when he called her name, and she heard the particular quality of terror in his voice that told her he genuinely loved her in that moment, and that was the last uncomplicated thing she would be certain of for a very long time. She tried to speak. Nothing came. She tried to move her hand. Nothing came. She heard Marcus on the phone with emergency services. She heard him say, "She fell. She's not moving. She's not responding." And she heard the dispatcher say, "Stay with her. The paramedics are on their way." She was already trying to stay.
She arrived at Meridian General at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. She knew this because she heard the timestamp called out in the trauma bay, and she filed it away with the particular precision of a woman who had learned that small details matter most when the large picture is terrifying. She knew the trauma bay. She had walked through it 400 times. She knew the light, the particular cold white that is designed to show everything and obscure nothing. She knew the voices. 3 she recognized immediately, 2 she did not. She knew the protocol being run on her body, could follow each step in the sequence, could identify the moment they missed the additional test that would have told them everything. She heard the resident say, GCS 3, no motor response, no verbal response, no eye opening. She heard the attending say, imaging, get neurology. She heard her own name said 11 times in the first hour. Each time she tried to respond, each time nothing moved. She was the most experienced neurosurgeon in the building, and she was lying on a trauma bay table being assessed for a condition she had diagnosed in other people 43 times, and she could not tell a single person in the room that they were running the wrong protocol. That was the first night. She counted her breaths instead. She had to stay calm. Panic was a physiological event. Panic produced cortisol. Cortisol was not going to help her brainstem. She breathed, shallow, machine-assisted, not under her control, and she counted, and she stayed. The neurology consult was day 3. She heard the consulting neurologist, Dr. Reeves, a man she had recommended for his position 8 months ago and whose competence she had previously had no reason to question, run through the bedside assessment. She heard him perform 7 of the 9 standard tests. She waited, with the terrible patience of someone who cannot do anything else, for tests 8 and 9. He did not run tests 8 and 9. She did not know if he was rushed or tired or simply confident too early. She would wonder about this for 22 days. It would not matter in the end. What mattered was the words she heard him say to Marcus in the corridor outside her room, his voice low and careful. We are seeing findings consistent with a persistent vegetative state.
She heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. She heard Reeves say, "I am so sorry." She wanted to say, "Run tests 8 and 9." She wanted to say, "I can hear you." She wanted to say, "Persistent vegetative state requires at least 30 days of assessment before that diagnosis can be applied. That is the standard. I wrote about this standard in a paper 6 years ago." She could not say any of it. She lay in her bed in the cold blue light and breathed and counted and stayed. He sat beside her for 4 hours that first night. He held her hand. She felt his hand, warm and familiar, the hand she had held for 12 years, and he cried in the particular way that men cry when they believe no one is watching. Quietly, deliberately, as if grief, too, required composure. She felt everything. She felt his hand. She felt when he pressed it tighter. She felt when he set it down to answer his phone and then came back and picked it up again. She wanted to press back. She tried. Nothing moved. She had loved him for 12 years. She was lying in this bed because she had been thinking about a patient instead of watching where she was going. She could not be angry at him for grieving. She could not be angry at the doctors for making a mistake she herself would have been ashamed to make. She could only be where she was, which was fully present and completely silent, and decide what she was going to do about it. What she was going to do was survive. She had survived a 6-year residency that had broken 3 of her contemporaries. She had survived the particular loneliness of being the first and the youngest and the one everyone watched for signs of failure. She had survived 347 surgeries where the margin between success and catastrophe was measured in millimeters. She could survive this. She started counting.
On day 3, at 11:42 in the morning, Marcus stepped outside her room to make a phone call. She knew it was 11:42 because the machine beside her head marked time in the particular way of machines: steady, indifferent, precise. She had been tracking time that way since day 1. It was something to do. It was the only thing she could do. She could not hear the call through the closed door, but she heard him come back in, and she heard the change in his breathing, a specific quality of exhale that she had learned over 12 years of sleeping beside someone, the exhale of a person who has said something they needed to say. She filed it. On day 5, he said a name out loud in the room by accident. He had been on his phone when he came through the door, and he had not finished the call. She heard 2 words before he caught himself and stepped back out. The 2 words were, "Diana says." She lay in the bed and did not move and catalogued the information with the same methodical precision she applied to surgical planning. Diana, a name, someone Marcus was talking to who had opinions that were relevant enough to relay. A woman, given the first name, someone he was apparently updating about the situation. It was not enough information to be certain. She needed more. She did not have to wait long. On day 8, Marcus came in at 2 in the afternoon and sat in the chair beside her bed and made 3 phone calls in sequence. She heard all 3. The first was to his business partner, routine, short, nothing unusual. The second was to James's school about pickup arrangements for the following week. The third was the one she would carry for the rest of her life. He had lowered his voice for the third call, not to a whisper. He was not the kind of man who whispered in hospitals. It would have felt theatrical to him, but to a register that was clearly meant to be private. She heard it anyway, because she had been hearing things she was not meant to hear for 8 days, and her attention was the sharpest it had ever been. "The attorney says we need to be patient," he said. "The insurance situation can't be touched until the legal picture is clearer. We, not I. We."
She processed this with the clinical detachment she had learned in her 3rd year of residency, when she had understood that the only way to function in the presence of catastrophe was to treat it as information rather than emotion. The information was this: her husband was consulting with someone about her life insurance on day 8 of her coma. That person was part of a we. The attorney was involved. They were being advised to be patient. She had 19 days left to live as of that call, if patient ran out. She kept counting. On day 14, she heard him lie about her living will. The head nurse had asked him about it. Standard protocol. She was doing her job properly. She needed to see the document before any conversations about future care could proceed. Marcus said, "She told me verbally that she wouldn't want extraordinary measures. She was always very clear about that." This was false. Simone had a living will. She had drafted it 8 years ago with her attorney Barbara Cross, with the particular thoroughness of a surgeon who had watched too many families torn apart by undocumented wishes. The document was specific: no withdrawal of life support without independent assessment from 2 neurologists confirming a permanent vegetative state. 2, not 1, 2. Marcus did not have the document. He had never been given a copy. She had kept it with Barbara because she had not wanted it in the house where the children might find it and be frightened. She had not imagined this specific situation. She had imagined a car accident or a surgical complication or a heart attack, the standard events that prompt a woman at 31 to draft a living will. She had not imagined lying in a bed 17 feet from her husband while he misrepresented her wishes to a nurse who was simply trying to do her job. She held the information. She held all of it, every word, every day, every name. She held it the way you hold something you know will matter later. Amara was coming. She had heard the voicemail Amara had left on day 18. Her friend's voice crossing time zones from Cape Town, saying, "I heard about Simone. I am coming home. I will be there by the 22nd. 4 more days. She counted them, one by one.
James had started bringing the drawings on day 2. She did not know this immediately. She had been in that particular suspended state of the first days, tracking time, processing information, managing the specific discipline of not panicking, and she had not heard him come in on day 2 because Marcus had brought the children during a period when she had drifted into the particular not-quite sleep that her brain permitted her. She knew about the drawings on day 3 when James came back. He was 9 years old, and he stood beside her bed and he said, "I brought you another one, Mom. I put it on top of yesterday's. I'm going to bring one every day until you wake up so you have something to look at." He said it with the complete conviction of a child who has decided that something is true and intends to make it so by the force of that decision. She recognized the quality of it. She had that quality herself. "I put the first one where you can see it," he said. "It's of our house, so you know what you're coming home to." She could not see it. Her eyes were closed. But she knew it was there, and she knew, with the certainty that had carried her through 17 years and 347 surgeries and 22 days of silence, that she was going to come home to it. She kept counting. She had something to count toward now. By day 10, there were 10 drawings. She knew this because James counted them when he arrived each afternoon. "That's 10 now," he said on day 10. "I drew our dog today. His name is Captain, and he misses you too." They did not have a dog. James had been asking for one for 2 years. She had been going to say yes in the spring. "I'm going to ask Dad if we can get Captain for real when you come home," James said. "I already have a name for him." She heard Lily's voice from the doorway on day 12. She did not come to the bed. Lily had decided that the machines were frightening, and she was permitted to feel that, saying, "James, Daddy says 5 minutes."
James said, "Okay." Then, to Simone, "Lily drew the background on today's one. She didn't want to, but I told her it would be better with 2 people working on it, and she said fine." She heard the rustle of paper as he placed the 12th drawing on the stack. 12, he said. "We're almost halfway." She had not told him to aim for 24 or 29 or any number at all. He had decided halfway on his own. He did not know toward what number he was counting, but the certainty in his voice was the same certainty she had heard in her own when she was 9 years old and her father had told her she could be a surgeon if she was willing to do the work. She was willing to do the work. She kept counting. On day 22, James brought the 22nd drawing at 4 in the afternoon. 22, he said. "I drew you today. You're standing outside the hospital in your doctor coat. You look exactly like you." She heard him place it on the stack. She heard him sit in the chair beside her. He had started sitting in the chair on day 15, which Marcus had told him was fine, but to be quiet, which James was, in his particular James way, and she heard him say, "Dad says you might not wake up. He says we have to be brave and think about what you would want." A pause. "I think what you would want is to wake up," he said. "That's what I think." She heard him pick up a crayon from the table. He brought them in a small tin, a detail she loved with her whole still body, and start working on something. The soft scratch of color on paper. 2 hours later, she heard Marcus in the corridor, on his phone, using the word withdrawal. She heard James breathing beside her. She kept counting.
She heard Marcus in the corridor at 6:17 p.m. on day 22. He was on his phone. His voice was low, lower than usual, the register he used when he did not want to be overheard, which she had learned to hear very clearly over 22 days of nothing else to do. He was talking to his attorney. She could hear one side of the conversation, which was Marcus's side, which was enough. "The application is filed," he said. "Yes, today. The hospital administrator has it." A pause while the attorney spoke. "How long?" Marcus said. Then, "That long." "Okay, I'll tell the kids this weekend." She heard him come back into the room. She heard him sit in the chair, not James's chair. Marcus had his own chair on the other side of the bed. She heard him exhale. She had known this moment was coming. She had been tracking his trajectory for 22 days with the same methodology she applied to a difficult surgery, identifying the decision points, anticipating the moves, understanding that the surgeon who panics in the operating room is the surgeon who kills the patient. She had not panicked. But she was running out of time. Amara was supposed to arrive tomorrow. One more day. At 8:45 that evening, the head nurse came into the room. Simone heard the nurse's shoes. She had learned everyone's footsteps in 22 days, could identify 6 different staff members by the sound of their walk, which was the kind of knowledge that builds up when you have absolutely nothing else to do. The nurse said, "Mr. Carter, I need to inform you of a development regarding your wife's care plan." Marcus said, "What development?" "A legal hold has been placed on the withdrawal application. We received notification from the hospital's legal department this evening. No action can be taken on the application pending further review." A silence. "Who filed the hold?" Marcus said. "We weren't provided that information directly. Our legal team will be in touch with you tomorrow morning." Another silence. Longer. "Okay," Marcus said. His voice had changed. The particular flatness of a man whose plan has just encountered an obstacle he did not prepare for. The nurse left. Simone lay in the bed and felt something she had not allowed herself to feel for 22 days. Not hope, exactly. She was a surgeon. She did not traffic in hope as a clinical category, but something adjacent to it. The specific sensation of a variable entering the calculation that was not there before. Someone had filed that hold. Someone knew she was in there. Simone did not know that Barbara Cross had filed the injunction.
She did not know that Barbara had received the court notification of the withdrawal application that afternoon and had immediately, without calling anyone first, pulled Simone's living will from her files and filed an emergency motion in Fulton County Superior Court, blocking any medical action pending compliance with the document's terms. Simone did not know any of this, but she heard a legal hold has been placed, and she kept counting. 23.
Amara Osei arrived at Meridian General at 11 a.m. on day 23. She did not go to Marcus first. She did not go to Simone's room first. She went to the nurse's station and she showed her credentials and she asked for the chart. She read it at the nurse's station. She did not sit down. She stood with the chart in her hands and read it the way you read something when you are looking for the exact thing you are afraid of finding. She found it on page 4, the Day 3 assessment, the 7 tests, the diagnosis. She said to the resident beside her, "Who ran this assessment?" The resident told her. "Where are tests 8 and 9?" Amara said. The resident looked at the chart. He said, "They're not recorded." "Because they weren't run," Amara said. Her voice was very even, very controlled. The voice of a woman who is extremely angry and extremely professional and has decided that right now, professional wins. "I need an immediate full neurological workup, comprehensive. I need to be there for every test, and I need someone to tell me how to find the patient's husband." Marcus tried to stop the assessment. The injunction held. Amara ran the assessment herself from 6 p.m. to midnight on day 23, while Marcus sat in the family waiting room and his attorney stopped returning his calls. At 2 in the morning on day 24, Amara sat down beside Simone's bed. The ward was quiet. The shift had turned. The machines maintained their steady record of a brain that was working much harder than anyone in the building had believed. Amara took Simone's left hand in both of hers. She said, "I'm here, Simone. I came back. I read the chart. I know what they missed. I'm going to fix it." A pause. The machines. "I need you to fight," Amara said. "Whatever you have left, use it. I am not leaving this room." Simone heard every word. She had been in the bed for 23 days. She had been counting for 23 days. She had been cataloging and managing and staying calm for 23 days, and she had been doing it alone in the particular silence of a person who cannot be heard. Amara was here. She tried with everything she had. She sent every signal she could send to the index finger of her left hand. She thought about the Abernathy case, the basilar artery, the approach, the millimeters, because precision was the thing. Precision was always the thing. She thought about James's 23 drawings stacked on the table she could not see. She thought about a dog named Captain. She felt her finger move. Amara felt it. One deliberate movement of the index finger, not a reflex, not a tremor, a press, intentional, directional, unmistakable to a neurologist who had been holding the hand of a woman she had known for 18 years. Amara did not make a sound. She pressed back, one press. Simone pressed again. Amara pressed once, then waited. Simone pressed once. They sat in the dark of the ICU at 2 in the morning and built a language out of a single finger. One press for yes, squeeze and release twice for no, hold for "I am here," and they used it for 2 hours. Amara asked questions, and Simone answered them. Amara told Simone what she had found in the chart, and what she had filed, and what was happening, and Simone listened and pressed once for yes, "I know, keep going, I am here, I have been here the whole time." At 4 in the morning, Amara said, "You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. That is a medical opinion." Simone pressed once. She could not smile, but she felt something adjacent to it, the specific warmth of being known by someone who has chosen to show up. Amara sat beside her until morning.
On day 25, at 9 a.m.,
Marcus was informed that the Day 3 neurological assessment of his wife had been revised. He was told this by Amara in the hospital's family consultation room in the presence of the hospital's patient advocate and the board's legal counsel. Amara was specific and precise and clinical, and she did not raise her voice once. She told him that the revised assessment indicated significant retained consciousness. She told him that the appropriate diagnosis was locked-in syndrome, not persistent vegetative state. She told him that Dr. Carter was aware of her surroundings and had been responsive to directed stimulus since the previous evening. She told him that Dr. Carter had been able to hear everything said in her room for 29 days. Marcus sat very still. His attorney, who had agreed to join the meeting by phone, went very quiet. The withdrawal application was withdrawn by Barbara Cross's office at 10:15 a.m. The life insurance inquiry was flagged by Barbara's office to the relevant authorities at 10:30. The civil proceedings that followed took 9 months and cost Marcus significantly more than patience had saved him. None of this was Simone's priority. Her priority was getting better. The recovery from locked-in syndrome is not a single moment. It is a series of small returns, each one hard-won, each one celebrated by the medical team with the particular quiet enthusiasm of professionals who understand exactly what they are witnessing. The finger movement on day 24, eye response on day 26, the ability to track movement on day 27, voluntary eye-opening on day 28. On day 29, at 2:17 in the afternoon, Simone Carter opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the ceiling of an ICU room she had walked past 400 times and had never expected to see from this angle. The second thing she saw was Amara. Amara was standing beside the bed. She had been there in some configuration for 6 days. She had a coffee cup in her hand and reading glasses on her head and the particular dishevelment of a person who has been sleeping in a hospital chair and has stopped caring about it. Their eyes met. Amara put the coffee down. She put her hand over her mouth. She made a sound that was not clinical in any way. Simone tried to speak. What came out was not yet a word, but it was something. It was the beginning. He was standing in the doorway. He had come that afternoon, the way he came every afternoon, with the 29th drawing in his hand. He had stopped at the doorway because a nurse had been in the room when he arrived, and he had been told to wait. He was standing in the doorway with the 29th drawing. She could see it. She could actually see it. She could see the careful lines of it, the blue crayon and the yellow, and the small figure that was herself, and the larger figure beside her that she would later understand was James himself, drawn as he imagined he would look when he was grown, and he was looking at her. She looked back. She lifted her hand, not all the way, not steadily, a few centimeters off the bed, her arm shaking with the effort of 29 days of disuse, but up. James ran to her. He stopped just before the bed. He had learned to be careful around the machines, and he pressed the drawing into her hand, the 29th one, and he held her hand around it, and he said, "I told you I'd bring one every day." She could not speak yet, but she could squeeze his hand. She squeezed it. He squeezed back.
The recovery took 8 months. It was not the kind of recovery that looks like recovery in films, the triumphant moment, the standing ovation, the return to full function in a montage. It was the kind of recovery that looks like a woman relearning to hold a pen, relearning to walk a straight line, relearning to produce the specific fine motor control that 17 years of surgical practice had made automatic and 29 days in a bed had temporarily taken away. She was rigorous about it. She had always been rigorous. She kept notes. She tracked her progress with the same methodology she applied to post-operative assessments.
She celebrated small returns with the same quiet satisfaction she brought to every hard-won thing. Amara visited 3 times a week for the first 4 months. She did not treat Simone, ethical conflict, but she sat with her, and they talked about neurology and about medicine and about the specific experience of being a conscious patient in an unconscious system, which they both understood would eventually become a paper and possibly a protocol change, and certainly a conversation that needed to happen. Simone was also getting a dog. James had confirmed this. She had nodded. He had taken that as binding. She returned to the department on a Monday morning in month 9. She had not announced it. She had submitted her return to work assessment to HR, and it had been approved, and she had shown up at 7 a.m. with her badge and her coffee and her surgical schedule for the week, and that had been that. Several residents had not immediately recognized her out of context. They had known her as the chief before the accident, but the 8-month absence had recalibrated the department's sense of who was permanent and who was temporary. This did not bother her. She had spent 4 years at this hospital without most people knowing who she was. She was comfortable with the gap between what people saw and what was actually there. She reintroduced herself at the morning briefing. She went through the week's cases. She asked 2 questions that the residents would later describe to each other as slightly more incisive than expected, which was what her colleagues had always said about her and which made her quietly satisfied. She was back. She had always been coming back. She had the 29 drawings framed. Not in a gallery style. She was not a gallery-style person. Simple frames, white mats, hung in 3 rows on the wall to the left of her desk in the chief's office. They were visible from every part of the room. Every resident who worked under her saw them. No one asked about them directly. There was something about the configuration, the careful rows, the children's drawings in a neurosurgeon's office, the fact that she never explained them, that communicated without words that the explanation was not theirs to have. She operated on the Abernathy case in month 6 of her recovery. The basilar artery aneurysm she had been thinking about the night she fell down the stairs. The patient had been managed conservatively in her absence and had waited. The particular patience of someone who has been told that their surgeon is coming back and has chosen to believe it. The operation took 4 hours and 11 minutes. She did not miss a step. Afterward, scrubbing out, she thought about the 3rd step from the bottom, about the files she had been carrying, about the case she had been mentally rehearsing. She had finished rehearsing it. She had done it. She went to her office. She sat at her desk. She looked at the 29 drawings. Her father had told her once, when she was 9 years old and had failed her first swimming lesson, the only way out is through. You do not go around. You do not give up. You go through it and you come out the other side and you look back and you understand why it had to be exactly that hard. She understood. She looked at drawing number 1, James's crayon rendering of their house, careful and earnest, the windows slightly crooked, the garden slightly too large, and she thought, I am coming home to that. She had.